Welcome to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. I'm Jamira Burley. I'm here with my co-host, Brea Baker. And today we are tackling the question that should concern everyone. Are we witnessing a constitutional crisis under Trump, specifically as it relates to citizenship and immigration?
Duh. Most recently, a young activist with legal citizenship was kidnapped from his home following pro-Palestine organizing on Columbia's campus. And Latinos have been targeted in their workplaces, churches, and schools by ICE agents. Everyone should be concerned, and this is absolutely a crisis. From legal battles to proposed policies that challenge democracy itself, the rule of law is being tested like never before. So we're going to break it down, what's happening, what's at stake, and how we fight back.
Yeah, it's quite disturbing hearing about the Colombian student being kidnapped in the middle of the night. And still you have the Speaker of the House not able to articulate any specific crime that he has committed, but just saying that because he protested, which is a constitutional right that each and every one has, he should be somehow punished because the politicians don't agree with the topic of what he is protesting.
Right, which is giving fascism, which is exactly what people are concerned about. And so I think we just need to stop talking about it like it's knocking at the door. Fascism is here, alive and well. And if we start with some of these latest headlines, we'll really see that for sure. I mean, one of the recent headlines that has been mind-boggling is that not only are American citizens and immigrants to the U.S. under attack, but tourists are being highlighted by ICE. A British tourist is in custody at Tacoma ICE detention center for weeks. Her fiance was having to get in touch with folks, and they said it was a visa mix-up. But like, what? Now people can't travel to the U.S. on vacation without worrying about being detained and incarcerated?
I mean, we should have took that as a sign of the times to come when we saw many countries around the world put U.S. as a travel concern regarding safety for tourists. And this wasn't just countries of brown or Black origin. These are white countries as well that was raising the flag that it was not safe to travel to the United States. Mm-hmm. And it's really terrifying to think that anyone can be picked up and be held for days, if not weeks, with no accountability and not knowing who to hold accountable, or at the very least to get your loved one back.
Right, exactly. Definitely a very scary thing. I mean, if I were a tourist, I'd be afraid. And I think that's the point of these sort of policies, is to instill fear in everyone, even those who do have citizenship. It's like now you have to walk around with all of your paperwork. And even still, like in the case of Mahmoud Khalil, that might not be enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the crazy headline you're seeing, even if it's unrelated to immigration? But
I mean, I think it's all related. I think it's all related because it's a prime example of how we got here, right? Which is corporate greed. And what we're now seeing is that Southwest, a beloved airline by many, not by me. I fly airline only. Let me be very specific. But sometimes you got to fly Southwest to get where you got to go, especially if it's like a random place on a random Tuesday for free bag checks. And for many people are extremely upset across the country who are witnessing as another corporate money grab, right? At a time where there is economic turmoil across multitude of communities, and we're seeing the stock market take a hit, but yet you have an airline like Southwest coming out saying that we know times are hard, but we're still going to charge you for bags, even though we haven't been charging you bag fees since the creation of the airline. And I just want to point out what's really unique about this moment is that Southwest doesn't offer a more superior service or unique destinations. And so I'm curious to see what hit they're going to take when people just, if they got to pay bag fees, just choose to go with another airline where they're actually going to accumulate miles that might be worth something.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. I think it goes back to this idea of people kind of leading with a certain brand, a certain ethos when that is popular, and then abandoning it when they feel like they no longer have to. And so for so long, Southwest has had that the people's airline mentality because they were supposed to be more affordable and there is no first class here. Everyone's equal. But the reality is they want your money just like the others do. And they're going to slowly pull back. Yeah, they're going to slowly pull back all of the policies that make it feel more egalitarian to the point where you're like, well, if I'm going to spend all of the money, I might as well get the more premium experience. I might as well get the snacks and the drinks and the TVs on the back of this set. And again, it may seem frivolous, like in the grand scheme of the other things we're going to talk about today, it may seem less urgent. But as you mentioned, this is an example of that corporate greed, and it's creeping up. Some of the brands and companies that we have loved and depended on for a consistent message are all falling in line and filing in together.
They are all compliant in advance. And it's going to have financial devastation for a lot of people, especially those who don't travel a lot, and every penny matters to them. And I don't blame them for choosing other options.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Well, another headline that has been like mind-boggling to me is that Trump has ordered a halt to aid in South Africa, claiming mistreatment for white landowners. First of all, those who just need a quick history lesson, we have been in a post-apartheid world since 1994. I was born that year, so I've been alive as long as South Africa has existed after the fall of apartheid. And this idea that justice for Black South African folks means mistreatment for white landowners who benefited from apartheid is mind-blowing. Like, what are we really talking about here? And it's no wonder, because Elon Musk is a white South Africaner whose family made money in South African mines, who probably really benefited from a pre-apartheid world. It's like, okay, yeah, your buddy's in the White House messing shit up. And so as a result, you feel the need to make sure the policy reflects his experience.
Yeah, I mean, this is a prime example of the U.S. playing kingmaker again, right? The idea that they have the influence, or should have influence, on how other governments run, and also how other governments are able to provide some level of healing and reconciliations to its citizens who were impacted by the apartheid South Africa. It's really frustrating. They would never do this to Europe if Europe decided to do this. They would never to parts of Europe. They would never do this to parts of Asia, right? And so the idea that Black communities, Black countries have to be handheld and told what to do because it might impact white South Africans, I think is really a sign of the times, and a sign that Donald Trump thinks that he can. This goes back to his first administration when he called them shithole countries, right? Yeah. That they are not smart enough or understand politics enough in order to make the right decisions. When these are their countries, they have the ability to decide what is healing and reconciliation for their citizens. And now you have a president like Donald Trump saying, we'll give you free citizenship if you want to come and be a refugee over here. And it's funny because I'm seeing so many videos from white South Africans that are like, we're good.
Yeah.
We might not like the policy. We or those who do understand like what's happening, they're like, yeah, we're good. We don't want that.
Yeah. And I think it's also so real because, to go back to your point of trying to play kingmaker, the Trump administration is definitely trying to export what it's doing here to the US. Mm-hmm. This attack on DE&I, this attack on anything that's equity, anti-racism, justice-driven, restitution-driven. And they're doing that here in the US, attacking DEI, critical race theory, woke, anything that relates to Blackness and justice and the movements that we've spurred. And the punishment for not complying has been, oh, we're going to pull your funding. Oh, we're going to fire people from this agency. And now you're trying to export that by saying, oh, this aid, we're going to pull that unless you get in line with what we're doing. And I just love to see the South African government being like, bye. See
yeah. And we also have to be honest, this is also them trying to hold South Africa accountable for bringing up its lawsuit to the international court regarding the apartheid and the open air prison that is currently happening to the Palestinian people in Gaza. So this is all connected. And it's all, again, a continuation of Trump trying to Brea's point, export the racism and the discrimination that we have historically done here in the US, right? That we laid the foundation for, the blueprint for around the world. Let's be reminded that Hitler got a lot of his cues from how slaves were treated here in the US. It's connected. The next headline, which it probably goes into the reason why so many people are uneducated in America, is because of the breakdown at the Department of Education. It is expected that nearly half of the Department of Education staff will be laid off by the Trump administration. And let me remind folks, the Secretary of Education has probably been on the job for less than 2 weeks. And it is really disturbing to think how teachers across the country are going to be impacted, students across the country are going to be impacted. And this is a reminder, we're about to leave hundreds of thousands, if not millions of students behind, because they're not going to have an advocacy organization, an advocacy entity within the Department of Education or within the United States federal department to be able to advocate for the rights of students, to ensure that they are being treated well, to ensure that funding in areas where states are not able to supplement that funding are met, to meet the needs of children with disabilities, children with different learning struggles are able to get access to a full education. And hopefully people realize that we need to shut things down. Shut the down.
No, legitimately, it's really scary because again, it all goes hand in hand. This idea that if you keep this population illiterate, disconnected, you know, sidetracked and entertained by other things, then they don't have time to shut things down, right? But Trump is pushing policies that could reshape our entire democracy. The plans for mass deportations, efforts to weaken the checks on executive power, like shit is getting real.
And also, let's remind that just a few weeks ago, Elon Musk said the reason why we need immigrants, highly educated immigrants from other countries to come to the United States through the H-1B visa is because we do not have a populated education here in the U.S. I disagree with that. Yeah. But how is this eliminating the Department of Education going to meet that need of ensuring that we have our own educated population who can fill the jobs of the future and not fall victim to many of our jobs being shipped overseas?
1,000,000%. But I mean, that's his plan too, because he's also not an American. He did not come here legally. So for someone who, I mean, he's trying to pave the way for more folks like him to be ushered in, and for our populations to be poor and subjugated and exploited. And it's just really messed up. I mean, it's absolutely a constitutional crisis for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we're seeing a pattern. When faced with legal roadblocks, the administration turns to fear and division to justify their extreme actions. But we're seeing protests happening, not just here in the US, but also around the world. And that gives me hope.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Time just sort of reported on the fact that the U.S. has been added to some international watch lists for civil rights. And it's like, about time. Like, thank you. Please, magnifying glass on what's happening here. Telescope on what's happening here, because we need eyes on it, and we need accountability. And right now, a lot of stuff is happening with impunity. And we've seen constitutional crises before. Nixon, Watergate, FDR's attempt to pack the courts, everything that happened under Ronald Reagan. But what's different this time is the sheer brazenness. Like, there is no apology. There's no attempt to be covert. There's no attempt to say things in code. They're saying the silent part out loud. And we should really be concerned about the fact that they don't fear the consequences of doing so.
No, I agree. And I think this would be vastly different if we had checks and balances, right? There are three branches of government and the administration seems to be running all of them. And I think that is what, to your point, lends to a constitutional crisis, is because of the lack of accountability and the lack of Trump being held accountable by his own party or reined in, I should say, by his own party. It's pretty disturbing. So we're going to take a quick break. You are watching On the Other Side of Change only on the Black Star Network.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. And right now we're accepting investors in our $17 million round to revolutionize the future of social media. Today, for just $399, you can own 60 shares of stock in Fanbase at $6.65 a share. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. While the big platforms have grown too massive and disconnected from their users, Fanbase is building a platform where creators and users truly come first. We've already raised $8.6 million from everyday investors who believe in this vision, and now you can join them. This is your chance to invest in a social media tech company with over 1 million users that is disrupting media by allowing anyone to reach all of their following and monetize their content from day one. The market is changing, big platforms are failing to serve their users, and Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now. Invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the future of social media.
We are back on The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. So before the break, we were talking about this constitutional conflict that is happening with the Trump administration. So let's break down what exactly is unconstitutional about what we are seeing with Trump and his allies, especially as it relates to immigration.
Yeah, one of the biggest threats is the use of executive power to bypass Congress. And we talked again about this before the break. I mean, the Trump administration and Republicans at large already have so much power in all three branches of government, but Congress is one of the few places where Democrats can hold some sort of line, kind of resist some bills and force conversation around things that are being passed. And so every time that the Trump administration goes around Congress, it just further reminds us that everything happening right now, it's like fair game to this administration. We really have no oversight into when and how they're making moves. It's emboldening ICE, which already had very limited oversight. I mean, you never know where someone is going, what facility. You know, when someone is arrested, you know what jail they're being booked at, when they're being transferred, how long they could be held in a jail before they have to see a judge, before they have to have some sort of right to talk to an attorney. You have people being picked up by ICE and not being heard from for weeks, who are being, having travel and deportation orders booked for them without any loved one or an attorney being able to reach them. ICE is showing up to private residences, people's jobs, people's faith spaces, people's schools, targeting people of all ages. I mean, last month they showed up to a Chicago elementary school. And it's just really weird because it's like, I'm sorry, are you supposed to be targeting criminals? Or why are you going to schools and workplaces and places where people are just trying to do what they do, to live their life, to have safety and dignity when they walk out of the door and try and make a living for themselves? And you have people who are forced to hide, or else they are dealing with ICE in public and in private.
Yeah. And again, it's easy to say that the reason why this is wrong is because it's unconstitutional. Absolutely. But also, let's be absolutely frank. The U.S. economy could not survive without the robust contributions of the immigration community that have existed in the United States since the beginning of time. Okay, that is just a fact. But we know that they want to put many of these people in concentration camps, aka private prisons, which only is going to extort free labor out of them for the ends of time. And there's a lot of parallels, right? We've seen this too. A lot of parallels are being made to Nazi Germany, which is not surprising considering that Elon Musk had the nerve to do a Nazi salute on camera multiple times that have now been duplicated by many people. I don't know why people want that online. But then we also see that these deportations and the disappearance of community members aren't new actions that have happened here in the US. They have actually happened throughout history. But now we're seeing this in broad daylight on camera. And we still don't have any way to hold these elected officials accountable to ensure we're getting the answers, but also to ensure these individuals are getting the legal representation that is due to them under the law in the United States, that would be due to any US resident as well as any US citizen.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And I mean, we said it earlier, it's the brazenness. Yeah. I mean, it's just mind blowing. And this is not new for the Trump administration. I mean, we've seen another term of Trump. We saw the cruelty, the forced family separation. We saw what he does. Yeah, exactly. But this second term is just bringing out new levels of just like, we don't feel we owe you anything. We don't owe you an explanation. We don't owe you, due process. We owe you nothing. And so it's just mind blowing to be like, oh, wow, they're not hiding any of this. They're not trying to, in the name of like, it's just completely blatant. And as you said, I mean, like the comparisons to Nazi Germany are important. And it's also important that we don't gloss over American history. And this is also very reminiscent of things that we've seen before that have happened to enslaved Black people, that have happened to Black people in the South during the Jim Crow era. Like, we are seeing a resurgence, which is make America great again. Like they're trying to go back in time and bring back this racial hierarchy. And Isabel Wilkerson talked a lot about this when she talked about caste. She's like, they're going back to casteism.
And I think what people need to remember is that, it's easy to see what's happening to immigrants and think, well, that's bad, but it's not happening to me. That's their end game. It's going to eventually happen to you. They want to create a system, a caste system that is going to, put all of us in some sort of either physical or virtual, either psychological chain that will not allow us to fully exercise our rights as an American citizen. And that's why we have to see the flags when they are raised, right?
Yeah.
See the alarm bells when they are being raised, because if we say, well, let's not worry about them because it's not us, what happens when it is you and there's no one to defend you, right? When you have allowed the system to close itself into you to the extent in which you now have no access to recourse in order to fight back. And I think that is what is really fearful. One of the things that I am fearful for right now, because they're picking up U.S. citizens. So it's not just about immigrants, right? Even if it was just about immigrants, that too is wrong. And I think we need to see other people's struggle as a reflection of our own and realize that we're in this together, that our liberation, our freedom is tied to each other.
Exactly. And that's exactly what solidarity is about too. I mean, the Mahmoud Khalil example, we talked about it earlier, but let's get in depth. This is a master's graduate student from Columbia University, a legal resident of the US. So for everyone who's like, just do it the right way, he did. And then still was taken from his home. His 8-month pregnant wife was also almost detained, but they ended up letting her stay back if she didn't get in the way of them trying to take her husband. And so it's really alarming to see this, that he can be arrested, that there was no justification, that he could tell ICE agents, hi, I have a green card. Hi, I have all of the documentation. Let me show it to you. He had his attorney on the line. They hung up on the attorney and then later said, oh, actually what was going on was that his green card is being revoked. Number one, the story and the goalpost keeps changing and shifting. That is always something to be alarmed with. So again, right now, you might not think that you're at risk because they're targeting a very specific group and you think I'm not a part of that group. What happens when they find some sort of legal loophole to make you a part of whatever group, whether that be you're a criminal, you're an immigrant, you are whatever that justification is, they will find a loophole and say, oh, shoot, we're arresting this guy and he has all the documentation that's supposed to keep us from detaining him. And we're just going to come up with something new. The White House press secretary said from her podium that he had his green card revoked because of illegal protests. That is not a thing in this country. Okay, so now protest is illegal? Like, what is really happening here? So anyone who speaks out against this administration has the risk of their citizenship being revoked, their constitutional rights being revoked. We should all be concerned. And it's been really important to see New Yorkers rising up, a very small minority of Democratic representatives rising up, which we discussed in the other episode. But like, this is real.
It's real and it's terrifying because, again, protesting by its nature means you are going against the traditional institutions of power, right? You are protesting something that they have done or is doing. So this is happening now regarding Khalil, but imagine what's going to happen if there's another police shooting and Black people go out into the streets to protest. Imagine when women start standing up for their rights and protest potentially a national abortion ban, right? Yeah. They then can say that this protest is against the law, that these individuals should then have their citizenship be revoked. Where do you go from there?
Yeah.
What recourse do you have as an American citizen if your inability to protest against the very unlawful things that are happening to you and people that you care about, or at the very least, you're protesting for someone else to live freely, right? Mm-hmm. Khalil was not protesting on behalf of Hamas, as they like to claim. He was protesting for a free Palestine. We need to stop conflating the two. You can protest and you can cheer on and you can support a free Palestine, support an end to a genocide, or even at this point, right, for people who don't want to claim it as genocide, you can support the end of a war, right? Because people are being harmed. The vast majority of them are under the age of 1, right? We're talking about 1-year-olds who haven't made it to their first birthday, who are dying, right? Yeah. So if you can't protest that in a free and fair country, what can you protest?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And again, it gets at this erosion of protests at all. The goal is fear, is to make people say, I know this is wrong, but I can't speak up because I have too much personally to lose. Like, I can imagine being Mahmoud Khalil and saying, I have a pregnant wife. Like, I have so much to live for, and being deported away from my family and leaving my wife in this vulnerable position at a time when she can probably not even fly is like very alarming and scary. And the hope is that other people say, I can't afford to speak up because I too have a child. I too have a pregnant wife. I too have someone who's in a vulnerable position and I can't leave them behind while speaking up for other vulnerable people. What are we talking about?
But that's why they want people to have kids, right? Because then you're easily manipulated. You're easier to control. You're less likely to leave your job or request better wages because you're just trying to hold on to what you can. Which is why, again, everything is connected. We can't look at anything in a silo. It is a way to control us and to slowly strip away our ability to fight back.
Yeah, 1,000,000%, which brings us to that. How do we fight back? We're seeing some really powerful resistance from grassroots movements who are challenging voter suppression and these deportations to state governments who are refusing to comply, who are committing to being sanctuary cities. I think it's really important that we remember that just because the Trump administration is trying to instill fear does not mean that they are pushing everyone into silence. People are speaking up, and we need the silent majority to join those folks who are speaking up, to use every platform at your disposal, to show up to the protests, to participate in the boycotts, to sign the petitions, to contact your elected officials. Like, we need this mass movement, and it's happening even if you don't always see it. So we've got some videos to kind of shed some light into the ways that people are either poking fun at or legitimately like rising up against this fascist regime.
Why did your family move from South Africa?
I think my parents were looking at that.
Do you know, like, what were they doing that? Your dad is bad. He's like, you put black people in townships for 30 years, and all of a sudden you're persona non grata anymore. Do you mind telling me, Keegan, what your parents were doing that made them flee for political asylum? Oh, by the way, if you can't see the room, Keegan's white. Can you imagine if he wasn't? You know what? Here's the thing is I'm feeling you're halfway on Keegan's side, and I just want you to know I gave Keegan the opportunity to say my parents were not involved in perpetrating the apartheid, and he went, all I can tell you is they were in danger. So, by the way, Keegan, I will give you a free heckle pass if at any point you want to clear your dad's name, but you have to say what job he did in South Africa. His silence is deafening.
I love this comedian so much. His name is Lucas. He is hilarious. And this is not a new video, actually. But what I love about it is that while doing natural crowd work, there's someone who's purporting to be, you know, on the receiving end of mistreatment, to be the one who is actually being harmed by this South African post-apartheid government. And Lucas is just like, nope. I'm not falling for that. And so, especially because you have Elon Musk and Trump who are kind of banding together to defend white South Africaners, we have to be students of history, and we have to be mindful of the fact that there are going to be a lot of people who are claiming to be victims of reverse racism around the globe. The more that this movement for reclamation and restitution and equity and justice rises up, there are going to be more and more Trumps and Elon Musks and Keegans of the world who are trying to stamp that out and purport themselves to be the actual victims, and that there needs to be this movement for white men who are being unjustly targeted by this woke era. And it's like, no. Absolutely not. We're not falling for that. And I love what Lucas did there. And it is very reminiscent of what Black South Africaners are saying right now. Like, we don't actually care about your tears. We are still pursuing justice in a post-apartheid world. And if that feels unfair to you, you can leave, because this is not your home, and it can't be your home. Like, listen, I'm here for people being able to move around freely, but not if you're going to come into a place and trample over the rights of the indigenous people there, trample over the rights of people of color there. And that's exactly what was happening in this situation. I love it.
Yeah, like, no one deserves to be harmed, right? But through healing and reconciliation, people are held accountable. And that for some people might feel like harm, but really it's not. And I think what Lucas really emulated is the need for all of us to practice discernment. When we hear things, when we see things, to ask questions of those who are presenting information as though it is evident in fact. I think that's the only way we're going to get out of this situation that we're in now, is people's inability to ask better questions of themselves, of their community, and of our government, to see if they respond with factual information that can be checked. Because the reality is, everyone wants to be a victim when it's most convenient to them, but no one want to face the facts, how they themselves have been contributors to the oppression of other people. And now it's coming to light, and I love it.
Yes, fact check, fact check, fact check. Ask the questions, look for the sources. Do not just accept a story at face value. I mean, even everything that we present here, like dig into it yourself and see what that is. And another great example of folks making sure that we are informed and asking the right questions is this next video of organizers warning community members against the sort of like ICE patrols and deportations that are happening.
If they don't have a warrant, you do not need to talk to them.
You don't have to answer their questions.
You do not have to answer any questions. Let them slide the warrant under the door or put it up to the window.
Where you can see it clearly.
It has to be signed by a judge. They can have their own warrants that are not signed by a judge.
They're not valid.
They are not valid.
Shut up, ICE.
Good morning, community. There's presence of ICE here, so don't open your doors. They are not allowed to go in unless they have a judicial warrant signed by a judge that they have to show through your window, so don't open the door.
Shut up, ICE.
I don't care.
Stay there, okay? For your safety.
Don't open your door. Please.
The warrant needs to have all the right information. If there's a mistake, you don't have to open
Yeah,
it.
don't open the door. Let them show you through the window. They can leave it out the door as well.
If there's any mistake on the warrant, it's invalid. If your name is wrong,
Let's not open the door. Have them leave it at the door.
The warrant needs to be signed by a judge.
It has to be signed by a judge with the right date, the right details, the right name.
They can have an ICE warrant that's not signed by a judge.
Don't accept any ICE warrants. They're not valid.
Get out of our neighborhoods.
What are you doing here? Why are you terrorizing these neighborhoods? Why are you kidnapping people here? We do not want you here. You are not welcome here. ICE is not welcome in our neighborhood.
Get out.
You guys are terrorists.
Get out of our neighborhood.
If they have a warrant, it must be signed by a judge. Do not open your door. If there is no judge signature on it, it is not a valid warrant. You are not required to let them in. Please make sure it's signed by a judge. They can put it through the window or they can put it under the door so you can make sure it is accurate. Do not open your door unless they have a valid warrant signed by a judge.
Community is going to be the only way we save ourselves, is people need to speak up and speak out. Oh my God. Whoever had the blowhorn, I need to get one now.
Right. No, I was literally thinking that. I was like, I need one just so that if ICE pulls up, I'm on it and I'm ready, because it's so real. They feed off of fear. They feed off of the hope that you're going to be singled out, isolated, and just unsure and not wanting to put your neighbors at risk. And so you're going to open the door to get them gone. But once you've opened the door, you've literally opened the floodgates for them to say, we were invited in and now we can take you. And I just love to see community. Number one, the repetition. It has to be signed by a judge. All of the details have to be correct. You do not need to open your door. Tell them to put it up against the window, slide it under the door so you can examine it without them having access to your home. Like, yes. But I already know your favorite part of the video.
Shut up, ICE.
That was so funny. I love it too, because it's also just like, at some point we have to remember, similar to Nazi Germany, people will say, I'm just doing my job. Well, get out of our community doing this whack job, because we don't want
you don't have to do your job. You don't have to do your job. There's a really, I forgot who wrote the quote, like, whether or not you became a Nazi in the administration working as a soldier, right? Whether or not you became that through your own volunteering, or whether you became that through appointment or through some form of nationalist ideology for what was happening with your country. You still were a Nazi, right? And that goes the same for anyone who chooses to become an officer of ICE. You don't have to do that job. You don't.
Yep.
You have to do that job. You don't have to support the regime that is locking up family members and separating children at the border and pitting kids in cages. Like, that is what you want your legacy to be, because none of that makes us safe. If anything, it perpetuates a very violent, a very fear-mongering and violent community that we all have to exist within, because now we don't know if our neighbors are going to have our back. But I think this video shows us that, people in the communities are standing up and speaking out because they recognize that America is only as great as those we allow to come into our country, make it a part, make it home, and also help to shift us to make us more diverse, more inclusive, and more welcoming to the rest of the world. A true melting pot. Yeah. I think some of Trump's actions, as he continues to pick out things from the melting pot, right, and throw it away, whether it's gay, lesbian, birthing women, biological birthing women, or trans, out of the melting pot, that doesn't make us whole as a country. If anything, it makes us less than who we truly have the potential to be.
1,000,000%. And we keep us safe, community. We keep us safe. So I just love to see community members speaking out in that way.
Shut up, ICE.
Right. Shut up, ICE. Get out of this community. We don't want to hear from you. Like, I love it so much. And then our last video, another example of communities showing up. There are massive protests happening all over this country. Do not be fooled into thinking that everybody's being silent right now. So if you're someone who's saying, I'm just doing my job, or there's nothing else that I thought I could do, or I'm just focused on me and my family, there is so much that you can do. Again, find your nearest protest, boycott, contact your elected representatives, and find protests like this one.
Casey, thank you. Breaking right now, a crowd gathering this morning in downtown LA. You're taking a live look at a protest over the recent surge in ICE raids and deportations. Last Monday, So
you can see a lot of protesters in downtown LA. They've got Mexican flags. They're in solidarity. Many of these folks are themselves Chicano or Mexican American and are fighting for their siblings, their loved ones. This is what solidarity looks like. And it's so important that we not allow it to be the people who are directly impacted to be the only ones showing up. But we all have to be speaking up, whether you're a non-Black person going to Black Lives Matter protests, a non-immigrant showing up for immigrant rights, a straight person showing up for LGBTQ rights. We all have to be speaking up in this moment.
Absolutely. And this is a prime example of when your privilege can be weaponized for good. And I don't normally say that, but this is a moment when your privilege can be weaponized for good. If you are not a directly impacted person being impacted by a particular issue, you have the ability to put your body, your platform on the line in order to represent the interests of those communities, because you are less likely to be to face any sort of like serious repercussions. And so it's inspiring to see that. And I know that mainstream media is not showing these protests intentionally, right, to discourage all of us from feeling like we do have allies, we do have people speaking up, because they know that true change comes when people start to organize, when people start to speak out, when people start to hold traditional institutions of power accountable. And now should be no different. And I think the more we share clips like this and information like this reminds us all that we have a say, that we have a right to push back and ask for more and to demand more of our government. And we shouldn't be fearful that we shouldn't be fearful that we are not going to have the people in our communities and our surrounding neighborhoods stand up with us, because we're constantly seeing examples of that's just not being true.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. So we're going to be right back. We're going to take a quick break. You're watching The Other Side of Change only on the Black Star Network.
We begin tonight with the people who are really running the country right now. Now, Trump is often wrong and misleading about a lot of things, but especially about history. Donald Trump falling in line with President Elon Musk.
In the wake of the unsettling news that MSNBC has canceled Joy Ann Reid's primetime show, The Readout, Roland Martin and the Black Star Network would like to extend an invitation to all of the fans of Joy Ann Reid's MSNBC show to join us every night to watch Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming on the Black Star Network for news, discussion of the issues that matter to you, and the latest updates on the twice impeached, criminally convicted felon-in-chief Donald Trump and his unprecedented assault on democracy, as well as co-president Elon Musk's takeover of the federal government. The Black Star Network stands with Joy Ann Reid and all folks who understand the power of Black voices in media. We must come together and never forget that information is power. Be sure to watch Roland Martin Unfiltered weeknights, 6 p.m. Eastern at youtube.com/Roland S. Martin or download the Black Star Network app.
We are back on the other side of change, only on the Black Star Network. And this conversation is by far not over. It is the beginning of so many other conversations that need to happen, especially as we look at the constitutional crisis that is happening with immigration here in the U.S.
1,000,000%. And if you want to dive deeper, because we all need to be diving deeper, please check out these books, The Undocumented Americans by Carla Cornejo Villavicencio, The Oath and the Office by Corey Brettschneider. And there's a new memoir coming out by Cristina Jimenez called Dreaming of Home, How We Turn Fear into Pride, Power, and Real Change. And then, of course, follow groups like the ACLU and Brennan Center for Justice, UndocuBlack, and anyone you know working locally, statewide, or nationwide on immigration.
And a reminder that an organized population is a dangerous population. And more importantly, stay engaged, know your rights, organize, and hold your representatives accountable. Until next time, keep pushing for a just future. And this is The Other Side of Change.